31 days ago, on January 1st, we began our journey together at the very beginning, learning the fundamentals of guitar. And, during these past 30 days, we've been focusing on one main thing: to be able to strum chords with a solid rhythm, being able to switch chords comfortably so that you can play songs. And I see that kind of like the trunk of the tree. If you imagine learning guitar like a tree, that's like the trunk. It's the fundamental thing that everything else rests on. Even if you want to learn finger picking or whatever else, you do need to have those skills. The idea of being able to move this hand with some level of dexterity and then having some rhythm, and that goes together to create any style of music, no matter what it is. And today I want to talk about some terms that guitar teachers like myself have no choice but to throw around. These terms are beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And I want to help you. The reason why we're going to discuss these is to help you figure out when it's time to move on, when it's time to go back and review. Ultimately, on guitar, the most important thing is your musicality. That's why somebody who plays piano or who plays some other instrument really well, they can pick up guitar pretty quick because they understand the point of it. They know what it feels like to have a whole song put together, and they have that confidence. So we can focus on that as newer players, and when we hit a certain point, we'll feel confident enough to move on. Now, a beginner to me is literally somebody who's getting started and beginning guitar. Let's say you tried learning guitar and it didn't work out. You're going to have to come back and do some beginner stuff. And I suppose you could call yourself a beginner, but really, I don't like these terms. I think so many people, I ask them, where do you think you're at? And they're like, I'm advanced. And it's like, well, what does that even mean? None of these terms mean anything. Unfortunately, as guitar teachers, we do have to be able to classify our lessons just so people know what to expect. And a beginner is somebody who is still working on the 10 basic chord shapes. We learned 4 in the last 30 days, but there are 10. C-A-G-E-D. That spells the word caged. Then A minor, E minor, D minor. So 3 of them also have minor forms. And then there's B7 and an easy F chord. And those are all the chords that you can play just with your 4 fingers without any other additional stuff. We have the 10 basic shapes that you learn through songs. You start with that progression I showed you, and then you might find a song that has an A minor. So you add that one more chord to it. Take a few weeks with it, and then add another one. And before you know it, you'll be really comfortable and solid. The worst thing you could do is just try to memorize all the chord shapes without any context, without any song learning or anything like that. So you got the chords, then you have the idea of rhythm. And this is the biggest variation from individual to individual. Some people show up and their rhythm's pretty good right off the bat, and they're able to pick it up. We don't really have to focus on it too much. Nobody's absolutely perfect. There's always room for growth. But some people definitely need to workshop rhythm. They need to get over some barriers, maybe due to their past experiences learning music as a child and being told, no, that's not the right way. One of my friends calls it the oppression model, where you force kids to read notes and it's like, you didn't do that right. That fear or whatever that may be does stop a lot of people from unlocking their rhythm. But everybody has rhythm. Straight up, it's an absolute fact. And I've had so many students who tell me they have no sense of rhythm. They've been taking guitar for 10 years, and we were able to unlock it. You just have to do the right things and eventually develop that confidence. And as far as rhythm's concerned, you get the rules. Your hand moves down and up, downstrokes and upstrokes, 1 and 2 and then you kind of just miss the strings sometimes, and you can make any strumming pattern. That's straight up 98% of rhythm. You take that, you're a good player. You're past the beginner phases, or maybe what we'd call a late beginner. Now, there are other things that you can do as a beginner. You can play simple melodies and that's totally fine too. I started playing guitar that way. I didn't start with chord shapes. I actually started with some of that stuff. And then a few months in, I began learning my chord shapes. And that's a fun way to get going. I have a lead guitar course that does that. It's like starting guitar from scratch, but from that angle without any of the chord shapes. But the thing is, we still learn rhythm. We still learn that dexterity. Those are the fundamental things that as a beginner, when you feel like, yeah, my hands can move from chord to chord and I can do some strumming, that's pretty good. You're not a beginner anymore. And as far as where to move on from there, there's a variety of things that I would consider late beginner or intermediate. Fingerstyle. To play fingerstyle effectively, your chord shapes have to be quite clean. Because if you can hear there, like half the notes aren't working. But if I strum that, it's good enough, But you really notice what strings are working and which ones aren't when you do fingerstyle. So that's why I would want you to be at the point where you're pretty comfortable with the shapes, because we have to unlock so much of what this hand can do now. The pick turns your strumming hand into one thing, right? It's just one thing that makes contact with the strings at a single point, down and up. And then you add fingerstyle to the mix, and all of a sudden, you and all of a sudden there's like all this extra stuff that your fingers are doing and picking particular strings. It has to be super locked into the rhythm. And that's why learning strumming embeds your body with that rhythm. And then when you start breaking it down and assigning fingers to do certain things, you can take the rhythm for granted. So that's kind of, if you want to go the fingerstyle route, chords and strumming is still the foundation of that. You get those two skills, the dexterity and the rhythm, and you can put it towards fingerstyle in that way. Another thing that people do, and this is like one of the more obvious choices, is to learn bar chords. So once you're super comfortable with the regular chords, you're going to see a B minor. And you're like, what's B minor? I never learned that. And you realize like, oh, it's this. And B minor is a bar chord. It requires you to bar your finger across multiple strings. And that takes a lot of strength and technique. The good news is the first time you try it, it seems like impossible. But then you realize there's a few tips and a few things you can do, and it becomes so much easier. And one of my favorite things is to start with the power chord. So we're not barring, we're just playing like two notes at once, but it puts us in that bar position. And I have tons of lessons and a whole course and all sorts of stuff on the process for learning bar chords. But if that's the way you want to go, they're super powerful. You can basically take the same shape and play tons of chords all the way up and down the neck. You can start playing in any key, pretty much any song. Like the basic chords can carry you most of the way. Bar chords are what carry you the rest of the way. And that's a really great path to go down. And another avenue that you can go down is to improve your rhythm. Bar chords is like improving your chord hand. We can just focus exclusively on this hand and go into those late beginner, intermediate, and advanced stages. Things like learning to strum while singing. Some people think that you just have to have it, but there's a process that you can do. The same way we tapped our foot, we broke everything down, and you can actually incorporate the rhythm that you're singing. Because when you sing, you're singing a rhythm, right? Like, I heard the news today, oh boy. That's like, and we can take the rhythm that we're singing, the rhythm that we're playing, and we're actually playing two rhythms at once. That's a really cool thing, and figuring out how that works and how to interlock them in a slow and steady way that, makes sure you get it. I do that in my course, Strumming Made Simple, if you're interested in that. We also cover being able to pick up strumming patterns by ear. That's another skill that you'd want to get in terms of rhythm. You listen to a song, you are able to kind of hear it as a whole, even if it doesn't have guitar in it, and you're able to think like, what sort of pattern fits on that? We learn to vocalize rhythms. There's a lot of things that we can do that are going to give us that skill where we can just pick up a strumming pattern by listening to a tune and just play along, and it feels right. So that's the way to go further with that. And then, as I already touched upon a bit, there's that lead guitar route. And for me, that's one of my favorite things to do, is to take guitar solos, to like... That's a really cool thing to do, playing, like jamming on the blues. And that all ties in together. It's more of like a lead guitar thing, the blues. You can still strum the blues. We do it in like the last chapter of my beginner level course, Learn Guitar Once and For All. But, there's just all these different avenues for you to go down. And I just want to show you that, these are the branches of the tree. The fundamentals are the trunk, but you need those fundamentals. And then from there, you can kind of go anywhere. This is a fine time to dream about what you want to do. Think about those goals, because that's going to help motivate you. Thinking like, one day I'll be able to play classical gas, and I just have to learn to do some strumming. And you don't have to do it in a boring way either. You can learn to play some chords and strumming on songs that you love. Like my father-in-law has this story. He's like 14 years old. It's like I guess 1975 or something. And he had to ride the bus all the way on a Saturday, which is like the prime day for being a teenager and hanging around. And, he went to see this teacher and learn piano. And the teacher's like, yeah, you want to learn how to play the Stones? And like doing all this cool Elton John stuff. And he's like, yeah, I want to do that. And then like, okay, here you go, Yankee Doodle or whatever, right? And they tried to make him go through the books and learn to read music and all that, as if, playing rock and roll was some end point. And now teaching music has gotten to the point where, yeah, you do start with the Rolling Stones or whatever you want to learn, but in a really simple way, maybe just playing the bass notes or whatever. And that's how I teach guitar on this channel. That's how I teach guitar in all my courses. We get to do what we want to do right away. What I'm getting at today is you just got to have those fundamentals. You can go anywhere that you want to go, and you can have fun right away. If you do want to keep learning guitar with me, I have a ton of lessons coming up, on the channel here. So please take a moment to subscribe. Also, I have a bunch of courses. I have a beginner course that I've mentioned a few times. I have fingerpicking mastery, bar chords made easy, strumming made simple, the complete lead guitarist. I have music theory 101. These are all courses, like full-length courses with tons of lessons, where I get a chance to go much more in depth than I can on this channel. Because ultimately, I can't do everything that I want to do on YouTube. Just based on the way the algorithm works, I do have to chop out a lot of the good stuff. Whereas in my premium courses, that's where I get to say, here are the exact lessons in the exact order. Here's exactly how we're going to do it. Here's what you're going to practice. It's just the most organized way. I have a workbook for all my courses, and they're all just complete paths. And you get to pick where you want to go. I have a bundle where you can get everything. It's just, having access to all this information is something that, when I first started playing guitar, I really wish that was the case. I remember going on this website called Cyberfret. I don't even know if it's still around. And there was just the weirdest mix of lessons. It'd be like beginner chords, then it would be like 3-note per string, every mode, some like Steve Vai licks and stuff. And it was just really confusing, and I was lucky I had a friend that I could call and just be like, yo, what should I do? What should I do next? That for me was the biggest thing, was just having somebody be like, you should do this next. It's going to work. I believed in him. I put in the work because he said it was going to work out, and it did. And that's what my courses do. They tell you what to practice next, and it works for people. So please do check those out. That's the best way to move forward with guitar, and to, make sure that you are getting that complete education and able to reach your goals, to do all the things. Everything's really goal oriented. And, I want you to be able to just play guitar the way that you want to play it in front of your family, your friends, and for people to be like, yeah, that guy can play guitar, or that girl can play guitar, so that's my goal for you. And that's why I set up this whole channel and set all this stuff up. Anyways, with that said, please, if you have any questions, let me know down below. We've covered a lot in these last 30 days, and have a fun time practicing. I'll see you soon.